Chloe Swarbrick on Q&A over the weekend. It was a mixed bag for Chloe. I wanted to show you this first question because it's a question based around a little bit of controversy about a methane target. At the moment, it's a band to get methane down to, and getting it to a specific target is a little bit controversial. And it's a bit of a tough question for some politicians to answer. And I wanted to show you the first question, which is what I said earlier about Chloe has an answer for most things. And so he asks her, this is Jack asked her about supporting the establishment of a single methane target. And straight away she answers it. She basically says, and I'm going to play it, in theory, yes. And that's it. Simple as that. Answers the question. And then they go on to talking about reforming the ETS. Let's have a look at Chloe Swarbrick this weekend on Q&A.
Said before that the Zero Carbon Act had bipartisan support. It did, although to be fair, National never supported that methane target. They've been explicit about that. I want to know from you, do you, in principle, support the establishment of a single methane target? That's
the perfect kind of question, in principle, that a politician won't answer, right? Do you in principle? No, I don't do hypotheticals. Yeah, so, and her answer is?
You, in principle, support the establishment of a single methane target?
In principle.
Yeah. How would you reform the ETS?
Well, I have a members bill to do precisely this. And actually, this has some roots in some of the work that I did on the Environment Select Committee during the 2017 to 2020 term, when we passed the Zero Carbon Act and also some changes to free allocations within the emissions trading scheme. So effectively, one of the first next logical steps that we can make in progressing bipartisan accord to improve the integrity of the emissions trading scheme is to enable the Climate Change Commission to be able to set the number of units that are available within the ETS.
So this is where Chloe's at her strongest. Facts she knows, research she understands, delivering it in a way, 60 seconds, that is just crystal clear. It's where she's at her best.
So this is something which I think, again, if we are to look at some of the decisions that were made against the advice or the requests of the Honourable James Shaw to the former cabinet, which resulted in the failure of a number of auctions, we need to improve the integrity of that scheme, especially given that the new government has put so many of their eggs in that basket to get our climate emissions down.
It's not going to happen, is it?
Well, look,
I mean, it's a members bill. So are you going to get a support of a majority of the House? It comes out of the tin?
I will be working constructively across the aisle. And I'd make the point on this that I actually had the first ever Green Party members bill that we're aware of, which passed through every single stage with full consensus of the House in the form of my Election Access Fund Act, which established a fund available for candidates with disabilities to remove barriers. That
totally different to the emissions trading scheme, though.
Yeah, but again, I would say that this is an issue in terms of the climate crisis, which is here now and which is bigger than partisan politics.
Adaptation. Climate Minister Simon Watt says he's committed to continuing cross-party work on climate adaptation. So what's that going to mean?
So we'll let this continue on because it's got another 30 seconds. It's the next part of the conversation, adaptation. The thing about adaptation for people to understand is the reason that National pleads, yeah, great, adaptation, we'll adapt. What they're basically doing is we're not going to try and solve the problem. We're going to adapt to the problem. We are not going to try and solve any climate issues. And so the right will say, yes, we're on board. Yes, climate change. Yes, this, yes, that. We need to adapt. And then they'll stop. Whereas the truth is we sort of need to reduce and adapt at the same time. And that's sort of what they're talking about now. This has got 30 seconds. We'll just play this and then we can have a chat.
So there is a climate adaptation inquiry which was announced in the last few weeks, which will be going to the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee. I've been engaged across the aisle working with the Honourable Simon Watson and have commended him on the fact that he's continued in the footsteps of James Shaw to that effect. But look, we have to go a lot further. We can't just be talking about adaptation here because we also need to be talking about mitigation. If we are not stopping the source of the fire, then all of the fire extinguishers in the world mean nothing.
I mean, perfect analogy, Joey. Biggest fires in the world, if you've got no way of stopping them, those fire extinguishers aren't going to work. So adaptation, yes, along with mitigation or at least reduction in that area. Any thoughts, sir?
Every time I hear a government talking about climate adaptation, it is a right-wing government. Read into that what you will. They don't want to change how we do things. They want us to change how we live. So, yeah, more petrol, more gas, more fossil fuels. There's nothing we can do about it. Big shrug emoji. We don't want to affect people's bottom lines. We don't want to encourage new industries.
Yeah.
I saw a comment go past it, like, just when you compare Chloe's statements and how she talks to Luxon, it's like, what's the comparison? A man getting kicked in the head by a horse? Just so clear. So clear, so across things, so aware of the context, and the exact opposite of what I was talking earlier of just being very surface level, never considering the flow-on effects or the other things that might contribute to whether what you're doing works or not.
Although, in saying that, we play each ball on its merits here. In this interview, which I'll show you in a wee while, she's not so skillful when it comes to interpersonal conversations. Like, I think Chloe seems unbelievably skilled when it comes to data and facts and research and evidence. We're going to get to a part of this conversation which is much more uncomfortable for the Greens, which is talking about their personnel and the troubles they're having so far. And, you know, in that conversation, I think there's room for improvement when it comes to communicating clearly, because politicians in general speak in a certain way, and I'm not saying it's anything like what I would say to you is, and not answering questions, but you can see when a politician is off their primary focus, it's harder to be as clear and as concise, which I'll show you because it happened. But before we do that, this is a very quick 30-second clip about activism versus pragmatism. Is she an activist or is she pragmatic? Which I think is a fascinating thought.
Organising.
Is activism a good way to get climate policy passed?
Well, Jack, we had this discussion a few months ago when I first put my hat into the ring for the co-leadership. Activism is a very legitimate means to go about drumming up public awareness on an issue so that we can put politicians' feet to the fire and change things. And this is a really cool point that I'll be making in the State of the Planet speech today. No positive progress is guaranteed. And that means that communities need to mobilise and not leave politics to the politicians such that we get the outcomes that all of us deserve.
Okay.
Now, there may be an element of that conversation, Cherie, which we could refer to our last conversation about, you know, pragmatism versus activism. But I agree. And in this interview as well, she does talk about, you know, following James Shaw's example of being able to reach across the aisle, which is more pragmatic. So maybe Chloe is saying you can use your activism as well on one hand and pragmatism when needed. That's sort of the vibe of the interview that I listened to.
Yeah. And I think this is, since Chloe stood up for the leadership, this has been a consistent message from her, is don't leave politics up to the politicians. And it's one thing that I 100% agree with.
Yeah.
Like, if people are agitating publicly for this sort of stuff, and then somebody in Parliament is trying to build consensus across the aisle and say, look, people want this, and then can point at a movement and go, see, look, these people vote. And I think it's also coherent that she's saying these things, especially when you saw James Shaw's interviews with Jack the other week, is that he was very clear that if the climate goals that the Greens have and the existential threat that climate change is to this country is as bad as it is, then they need to be building that cross-aisle consensus that the environment is important. It is not just a left issue.
Yep. And it can't just be a left issue if they want things to pass. I mean, that's the reality with pragmatism as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, now this is the next part of the conversation. There's a couple of bits here. I've left a bit in about Efeso Collins because Jack asks about how is the party doing, and some quite, you know, you can see there's not quite it's not, no one, you know, breaks out in tears, but you can see that there's still a sense, obviously a sensitive side there for what the Greens are still going through with the loss of Efeso. And then we go into a conversation around Darlene Taha. Is it Taha? Was I about that right? And also Julianne Genter after this. So we'll play this through, and there are some moments here we'll stop and pause, and because we do commentate on the commentators, I'm going to reflect on Chewie, and I want your thoughts as well as to where the messaging possibly would have been better for the answers. Let's have a listen.
I want to talk about the party. It's been a rough year. Let's start with Efeso. How is the caucus doing after Efeso's death?
I'll be honest with you in that, nothing could repair you for just how devastating it is to lose a colleague. I mean, I was sat with Fess in the chamber the night before he came home to Tamaki Makaurau and passed away. and myself and Debbie Ngāti Wapaka, were engaged in a little bit of back and forth with the government. And Fess was just sitting there in his gentle, giant way. An incredible loss.
Yeah. Has it had a kind of continuing impact on the caucus? I know it's a relatively inexperienced caucus.
Look, the nature of grief obviously looks different to different people, but the reality is that we're probably still going to be grappling with the impacts of that on all of us personally for a while to come.
Yeah, there have been some other incidents.
Yeah.
Quote, aggressive in the sense of being hostile, unprofessional, with an element that was objectively threatening, but not in the sense of physical violence. Do you know who that describes?
You tell me, Jack.
Come on.
I am assuming that you are talking about the behaviour of Julianne Genter, which she obviously immediately apologised for.
I'm not, which is the point.
Okay.
That was a description of Tim van der Molen.
Okay.
He was held in contempt.
Anyone says Jack Tame gives it up to the left, he just walked her into that trap. He just walked her into it.
I heard the trap snap shut.
Yeah.
Damn.
Now, where the messaging is lost, remember, we're just a couple of buffheads from Dunedin. No one needs to listen to us. But where the messaging is lost from this is Chloe is relying too much on she apologized straight away. She doesn't hand wave away the accusations or the serious nature, but she relies too much on, but she apologized straight away. It's a bit like when National want to talk about numbers and not the numbers of reduction of, public servants rather than the service they provide. Relying on but she apologized straight away. She moves away from the actions a little bit, even though she says, I'm not moving away from the actions. It kind of does, but we'll play through it and then we'll get your thoughts, Joey.
Of Parliament censured last year after he was accused of threatening a Labour MP in Select Committee. Christopher Luxon stripped him of his portfolios after that. Do you think that was an appropriate response from a party leader at the time?
I got to say, these are two completely different circumstances. Tim van der Molen, from my understanding of the situation, denied that what occurred.
Well, yeah, they're different in numerous cases. And I'll even say this again that I said last week, which some people criticized me for online. A female standing over a male is different from a male standing over a female because to be in fear or to be intimidated or someone to be intimidating, you need to be intimidated. A 65 kilo, 5'5" woman standing over a 6'3", 110 kilo man is not intimidating. Now that doesn't.
About this, we can't make that.
That doesn't. No, listen, that's why I say there's not. No. That's what I'm saying. In the house, it makes no difference. But one of the standards we judge it by is in society it does. In the house, there is no difference with behavior between male, female, no difference. So you didn't quite finish that, Joey. In society, we judge it by objective reality. And the objective reality of a woman standing over a man yelling is very different from a man standing over a woman yelling. In general, yes, a 6'4" shot put woman standing over a 5'2", 90 or 60 kilo man is different again, but in my generalizations, Joey. Now, sorry, you were going to correct me on something. Feel free, sir.
I thought I did. I have nothing more to add.
No, but I agree with you. It's no different in the house. In a workplace, if a man says something sexist, it should be treated no harshly or better than if a woman says something sexist. In society, there are different. We put different rules on it. I'm sorry if the reality doesn't sit well with your determination to find hypocrisy tonight, but that is the reality. Man punching a woman is different in society than woman punching a man. It just is. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't know. It just is. That's the reality we live in.
And obviously went through a privilege.
Sorry, Chewy, you go.
But my one concern with the line that you're going down is it brushes away potentially in general the fact or trying to paint the picture that a man can never be threatened by a woman.
No, it doesn't, because I just said,
it's my concern whenever we start talking about this. I'm just making it very clear.
No, that's fine.
Right.
And look, I think with my example of a larger, stronger female over a male,
doesn't have to be physical size.
Sure,
Honestly,
and
it doesn't.
I don't disagree with you, Chewy, but I'm saying as a generalization, which is probably silly of me, if you lined up 100 men and 100 women, and we're only talking about physical violence here, because that's what we're talking about, the intimidationary thing, that in general, mostly men are going to be more intimidating to the women than the women are to the men. I think it's a fair generalization amongst society.
I think without going down analogy, when we're talking about these two different examples, Julianne Genter crossing the floor and standing by that male MP and going, have you read the brief? Have you read the document? While he smirked, he wasn't threatened. The behavior was well out of order.
Of course.
With the one that they're talking about where the guy was stripped of his portfolios and that sort of thing, where he was directly standing over top of the other MP and blocking a door and demanding that he stand up, as you would to a person in a pub, stand up so I can knock you down.
Yep.
To the point where parliamentary staffers were calling for security. I see her point here. Jack's trying to draw a line between these two things, and they're not the same, and no two circumstances should be. Yep, she can go, cool, she apologized altogether. I think she needs to push back here on the comparison between the two events. They are completely different. Julianne Genter's failing here is not keeping her emotions in check and behaving out of order in the House. It's not a question of going, was that a threatening move and this national MP was going to get thumped in the air? That wasn't it.
But that's what they're selling it as. They're selling it as no different.
That's what I mean. She needs to push back against that. Yeah. They're not the same.
Well, look, what I'll say again is that behavior should be treated maybe on a different scale, but the same in the House. But like, as in, if you've broken the rules of the House, then you've broken the rules of the House, whether you're male or female. But in general, there are different, like, that's why in parts of the world they have, like, you know, assault 1, assault 2, assault 3, or murder 1, murder 2, murder 3. These things all happen on different levels. And it's not just because we're defending, you know, the side of politics we're on. I'm just giving you reality within society. In general, not all the time. We're not
talking about society in general. We're talking about actions in the House.
Well, but I think that there's an element that we are actually looking at this and judging it from in society as well, which is why I say there's angles to look at this. I think that we're looking at it from outside the House as people, as citizens, as voters, as people who consume the media, and we are also judging it from what happens in society. I think that's a part of the conversation people go through, rather than just okay, we won't debate, we won't talk about, you know, how this would be in the real world, only in the House.
I guess my pushback on this is, as a reasonably solid sort of dude, I have been threatened by women smaller than I in the job situation and that sort of thing, and it's different, you know, but it doesn't make it any less threatening. Sure. Do I look at the footage of what Julianne Genter did? I do not see a man that feels like he's under threat.
Well, that's the other way I was saying. Yeah. To be intimidated, one needs to be intimidating. Like, did he feel intimidated? Probably not. Does that therefore mean her actions were not intimidating? Because that's what they're accusing her of, being intimidating.
I think it's well out of order. Yeah, but
100%. We're not going to argue that it was out of order, it was incorrect. Sanctions are probably appropriate. You know, maybe something through the greens, maybe, you know, being sat down for a little while, all appropriate. But this has also turned into a societal narrative that the right are pushing, Chewy. So I think to just say, you know, outside of the House, it doesn't mean, you know, we're not looking at that. That's what part of their narrative is.
So I think these two things, the two different events, what's actually happening there is they're lessening what their dude did and making Julianne Genter's brain fart more heightened. Yeah, they're not the same. They're not even close to the same level, and it's not to do with the gender.
Yeah. So what they're saying is either
not the same.
They're either saying our guys was only as flippant as your girls, or they're saying your girls was as serious as our guys. Whichever one of those you want. All right, we'll keep going.
This process, Julianne immediately apologized and acknowledged her actions were completely unacceptable, and we've reinforced that from the get-go.
If Julianne Genter is held in contempt of Parliament, will you stand her down from her portfolio?
I guess we have to ask the question.
This is again not a particularly good response. The response here should be all options are on the table. We'll see what comes of the investigation. All options are on the table. But this is the one part of this conversation where Chloe does play a little of the political game, goes, well, we can't answer the hypotheticals. But the correct answer here would be something like, if that does happen, all options are on the table. End of conversation.
In contempt of Parliament, will you stand her down from her portfolio?
I guess we have to ask the question of what is the point that we're trying to get to here. Julianne is an incredibly knowledgeable and hardworking member of Parliament who has made massive contributions in the transport space, but none of that is to make any excuses for the behaviour which happened that Wednesday night in Parliament. So, look, if more things do end up being necessary as we work through this process, then we will work through that.
We've seen the behaviour. I mean, from what you've seen of the behaviour, I mean, it was a remarkable thing to witness in the House. Do you think that is worthy of stripping your MP of her portfolio?
Again, I think that they're completely incomparable situations. If
they're not really incomparable. I just read you a description and you thought it was Julianne Genter.
Jack,
again, I was talking to the fact.
But what I'm saying is that idea of saying all options are on the table is a way of saying that could be a possible outcome. What you're asking me, yes, it could possibly be, but equally it may not be. It's quite a good way to be able to say, I'm not going to filibust here. I'm not going to say this is hypothetical. It's actually saying maybe we'll have to wait and see. Quite clearly, all options, Jack, will be on the table at the end of the investigation. That conversation is then finished, Chewy. Because what comeback can you have that? It's like, maybe you're right. Maybe that will happen. Maybe it won't. All options are on the table.
Yeah,
done.
Take the heat out of the question. Yes.
Yeah, totally.
Moving on.
Totally.
Rather than
you
pushing
are
back,
talking about media descriptions.
I mean, they are actually, about as comparable as two events can be. I mean, we can maybe quibble over the time with which they took to accept fault and apologize.
Yeah, no, but see, that's not a quibble, Jack. That's quite a serious part of the nature. When you start off by defending yourself, and then what becomes is expedient to apologizing is actually very different from apologizing straight away and recognizing straight away. It's very, so it does actually, it's not a quibble, it's actually a serious part of the actual conversation.
I mean, we can maybe quibble over the time with which they took to accept fault and apologise, but I mean, that they are so comparable that you yourself thought that I was describing your own MP.
If I can bring you back to the core point, Julianne made a mistake. She messed up. She owned up to that.
And there should be consequences for those mistakes.
And there have been, Jack, through the likes of the public kind of, chastising that has occurred over the past few weeks.
That's a really good point.
Well, do you think that's a good point though? Because what they're saying is, should there be consequences politically for someone who's done this? And the answer is, have you seen the nasty tweets there's been? It's like, on some level, it's also, I think Chloe's saying, without saying all outcomes are on the table, it's also saying we don't have to correct her, the public's doing that. I don't know if I'm quite sold that that's such a good messaging, Chewy.
I don't know. If Julianne was completely unrepentant about what she did,
yep,
absolutely, strip her of the portfolio.
Yep.
But the instant adjustment, the instant owning of it in the media, I think when you look at the political landscape, and remember, there's been studies into this, that how toxic the debate around our MPs, and especially our female MPs, has got, that I think this is a really valid point, is that there is a punishment that is instantly paid by a female in the Green Party for having a human reaction. There's comments in our chat tonight about how Chloe is too emotional, and I think that this is a comment that needs to come forward more. We lost Kiri Tapualan, we've lost Golriz, we've lost several other MPs through an absolute hounding from an unhinged public. So I think when she's mentioning this as far as a price to be paid for her poor decision and her actions, I agree with it. This is part of it.
Side note here, and can I just say at the moment, the chat is with you, Chewy, so great. Do you think the reason Golriz actually resigned was because of how the public treated her? Or do you think, in all honesty, someone can get accused of shoplifting, as I don't think anything's been proven yet, and remain as an MP?
No. She went. What I'm talking about is, in Golriz's case, you have a very high-profile female Green MP.
Yep.
That has been instantly disliked by the hard right of the politically motivated public,
of course,
who is dealing with what is it? She's got MS, dealing with a long-term debilitating illness, and to have that constant pressure of her job and the comments around her and everything that she does and everything that she is.
Yep.
I think that had a mental toll. And when you break like that, who knows what you're going to do? And it could be drinking too much and deciding to drive. It could be shoplifting from boutiques. That sort of thing. I'm just like, this is what happens. And if you grind out all the humans, the people that are passionate about the things that they take into Parliament, and you hold them to the standard where they can't have emotions, they can't be passionate, and we let people comment on them in such vicious, like the stuff around Golriz is evil.
Yeah, I agree.
There are some people in the social media comments that are evil with how they talk about her. They broke a person and they took glee in it, and they still are. And so this is why I'm glad that Chloe's mentioned it, is look, there is a cost to what she did. It's not necessarily Green Party process. And maybe we don't add to it.
I mean, like, this is now turning into a conversation that's far, far bigger than we can handle in the next negative 2 minutes before the show runs out. But it's a bit of a little chicken or the egg. Was she broken and did the things? You know, was Kitty Tupper Allen broken and she did the things, or she did the things because she was broken? You know, what did people break them, and was the thing an outworking, or was the thing an outworking and it caused them to be broken? You know, like, which way does it go? Because what you're also saying, I hear you saying, is when I say if you've shoplifted and, you know, in these serious, or if you've run from the police, you know, can you stay an MP? I mean, I think most people would say no, it's pretty hard to stay an MP there. But what's the cause of running from the police? What's the cause of the shoplifting? And if that came directly from your job, you know, like what you're talking about, then there's a much bigger question to be answered. And I think the one thing you talked about was about being emotional. Like, maybe the difference is Julianne Jensen's not going anywhere. She had an emotional outburst, but she's not going anywhere. And that's probably because there was no, and I'll say alleged because I don't know where they're at, but alleged criminal activity involved with her emotional response at the time, which I think, again, we all agree with the emotional response. It's just the standard of what you're supposed to do at your place of work. And that's maybe the difference. And I'm not saying, therefore, she's fine and the other two aren't, but that's probably the line for staying in your job. I mean, we all know people, you probably know people that got convicted of drink driving. I know a guy in radio got convicted of drink driving, so he lost his radio job. He could still do his job, but there was a line that was crossed that he could no longer do his job because...
Hey, look, if you want to talk about radio, you can throw your partner down the stairs, break her back, and come back in a couple of years. It's fine.
It was very bad for the station when they did that. Hey, and because I was there at the time. This has got about 90 seconds to go. Let's just play it through because we'll see what else she's got to say. Because at the moment she's talking about Julianne Genter. She goes on to talk about Darlene Tanner as well, but I've cut most of that out and I'll reference it at the end and tell you why.
She owned up to it and she has made amends. Yeah. We are getting her personal and professional support. She is operating within the realm of the privileges complaint, and we will work through that process. And we're getting on with the work, which I think is the most important thing.
Will you consider standing her down if she's held in contempt?
Again, I don't really get the point that we're trying to get to here. Julianne made amends almost immediately. She acknowledged that she had done wrong. We are working through the Privileges Committee process.
So let me say one more thing. I actually think what she's saying is fine, but I also know how the media works. The media will spin this as she won't answer the question. That's probably a part of like, again, you know, all options are on the table once the investigation is finished. Done. Will you stand it down? All options are on the table once the investigation is finished. I can't tell you now because the investigation is going on. So I actually kind of agree with you. Maybe I'm being a bit, what's the word when you try and find an argument that's not there? I know what she's saying. I get it. I think what she's saying is fine, but I also understand how that will be read and how that will be respun by dishonest actors. And I think that there becomes a problem for the message of this political party and this person. Is that a better way of saying it?
Yeah, and look, it's something like it's a double-edged sword when it comes to Chloe. her answers are good. They're expansive. When Jack's looking for a soundbite,
yeah,
and he'll push until he gets it.
yep,
And when you're used to giving expansive, fulsome answers,
yeah,
maybe that soundbite's going to get clipped into something that you didn't intend.
yeah.
And so I agree with you. Yes, there should be a short version of this that is just basically like, here's the long version. Jack, okay, well, I'm going to ask the question again.
Yeah.
Right. All options are on the table once it's cleared the process that I've just discussed.
I've seen people in interviews go, asked and answered, next please. I know that's too aggressive to say it like that, but that's basically what you're saying. And
the media love taking a head, like taking a scalp, like we were part of getting rid of that person. You know, it's almost like a badge of honor. And I just don't like, and sometimes they go for it when there just isn't the call for it. Like this is a flash in the pan. Julianne had a fucking brain fart and instantly realized, like this conversation should be over. There is no comparison.
Yeah. We'll get to the end of this bit about Julianne Genter, then I'll just tell you what they said about Darlene Tanner as well.
Of that are she's getting personal and professional support. And the other point needs to be made here, Jack, that she has made immense contributions within the transport portfolio.
But it's about leadership, isn't it? And what does it say about the Green Party's attitude to bullying and to professional standards that Christopher Luxon would appear to be holding his MPs to a higher standard than yours?
His MPs completely denied what had occurred, which ended up being
he accepted it once they went through the Privileges Committee process. Tim van der Molen apologised.
Again, Julianne Genter.
Yeah, that's an important part. Once they went through the privilege, how long was that? How many weeks or months was that? Once they went all the way through.
Apologised immediately for what had occurred.
And so that's enough for her to hold the portfolios.
What is the point that we're trying to get to here around the
well, it's about the standards in public life that we expect from
representatives. And the standards are that Marama and I have been completely explicit consistently about the fact that we make absolutely no excuses for and completely apologise for that behaviour. It has no place in our parliament from any member of parliament, from any political party, least of all in our own.
There you go. Yeah, that was it. See, at the end, and you know what happened after that is they moved on to the next question. So maybe, just needed to get that one out. I'll play this last one, then we can chat. This last one's around Darlene Tanner as well. Basically, Jack spent a couple of minutes saying, or 90 seconds saying, why are you still paying her? Why is she still being paid a full salary? And all I could think when I was sitting there watching it was, that's probably actually an employment law. Like there's probably a legality that you can't just go, oh, by the way, we're investigating this alleged incident now and you're not earning any income. So I didn't really want to play the 90 seconds of that because I think that's probably, if any person out there working in a job, if the workplace stood them down while they're investigating an incident, they probably just can't go, by the way, you've got no income for the next 4 weeks. So I kind of find that to be a bit pointless. But what was interesting was Jack reads out a statement that Marama said about we have found out some more information that we didn't know, and then challenges Chloe on what is the new information? Like, what is it all about? Because if there's more that we don't know, why are we still treating it like we don't know the answers? That's probably a bad paraphrase, but let's just have a quick listen. It's only, we're only looking at like 60 seconds.
Quote, it came to our attention that Ms. Tanner may have had some prior knowledge of the allegations. That's from Marama Davidson on the 14th of March. You say there's a natural justice process that applies. I think people would agree with that in principle. But that sounds like your co-leader publicly acknowledging that Darlene Tanner misled your party.
That is, that statement that you've just read out there from Marama is the statement that we provided to the media off the back of why we started this investigation.
So did she mislead your party?
The point of the investigation is to get to the bottom of it.
But I mean, that's what that statement
The point
implies.
Of the investigation is to figure out what Darlene Tanner knew and when.
It came to our attention that Ms. Tanner may have had some prior knowledge of the allegations. If that's the case, there will be many people saying, why are we continuing to pay her throughout this? Sure, give her the natural justice thing. Don't kick her out of the party necessarily until you have a result of this investigation. But at the very least, if she knew about some of these allegations and she hadn't revealed them to the party, she shouldn't be taking a salary.
That's the point of the investigation, Jack, and that's the point of the natural justice process that we're following.
There you go. That's the end of that conversation as well. Much more succinct with that one, but it was an interesting perspective, even from Jack, to go, if you guys are saying there's more that we didn't know about, that she may have had some knowledge of these actions, that seems to be an interesting part of this conversation. That's it for Chloe on the show. That's anything you want to add to from those 2 or 3 topics?
Yeah, like when they talk about this other issue, somebody being stood down on full pay and that sort of thing because there's an independent investigation going on, that's unquestionable. Like you can't stand someone down like from an employment. I know being an MP is not the same as a standard employment type thing, but if someone is being investigated for wrongdoing, you can't take their pay away while you do it.
100%.
There might be a question around the speed of the investigation. But this is why it's not an internal green investigation. They have done exactly what they should do. They've employed a barrister to investigate it. And then once they have all the facts, then they can react.
Yeah.
And I have personally no doubt that if this person is found to have done the things that she's been accused of, she's gone. She's absolute gone burger.
Yeah, because that would then cross that line of potential, I don't know whether it'll be criminal, we don't know yet, but of potentially laws being broken, whatever the actual thing would be. And that seems to be for politicians. I mean, you think about, I know Sam Uffindell's thing was when he was a teenager, but the Moldavian, whatever his name was, none of that seemed to, well, Uffindell potentially was, but was never convicted of a crime. Was that seems to be the line for politicians. They can all fuck up, they can all get help, they can all get better, like all of us can. But if you cross that line of, I guess the worst embarrassment ever, but it seems that if you cross that line of potential, because I'm saying potential because it needs to be proven in a court of law, criminal activity, that's the gone burger moment for anybody, both sides. So
I think there's another aspect of it as well. When you're comparing these two examples that were used with Julianne Genter and that sort of thing, and other examples right and left, I think there is a really clear example here of the left apologize straight away.
Yeah.
And the right do not.
Yeah.
They wait until they have absolutely no option to apologize. And part of this is I think the left apologize sometimes when they shouldn't.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. And I always use the example of the American politician whose name I always forget, and someone always puts in the chat for me, the guy who used to write for Saturday Night Live, the comedian guy who was caught doing a cheeky, inappropriate photo from the 1980s where he was doing this over.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And
I mean, example.
I mean, ick, yuck, whatever, but he never actually did anything. Al Franken, see, straight away, thanks, guys. He never actually did anything. He never committed a sexual, and he just resigned straight away. And I think that was detrimental to American politics. But I
absolutely agree.
Yeah. But that was in the middle of the Me Too, so maybe there's a bit more reality check there as to why he did it. But yeah, the left seem to fall on their swords far more quickly. And I look at it from one sense and I go, well, that's kind of honorable. But I look at it from another sense and we go, the right will, I say this all the time, the right will just play the dirtiest game ever to win no matter what. The left will be happy with a loss as long as they've played a good game. And I find that frustrating.
And just to clarify here, I wish the left didn't apologize so much does not apply in this Julianne Genter thing. I think front footing it and applying apologizing instantly and owning it was 100% the way to play it. And I think when you're looking at Green Party, just the way the Green Party act, when you're trying to build a story around, say, non-transparency out of the Green Party policies and procedures, you're barking up the wrong tree. They are the most transparent party to their detriment at times of any party that's in the House.